What is up? Who's ready for some grinded out Thursday night football? AFC North battle between the Steelers and the Browns. Pete McCarthy, Geoff Ulrich with you here on our Stokastic DFS channel. Give us a like, subscribe. Be sure to hit that notification bell, find out when our shows go live. We are breaking down this Thursday night game from the props at No House Advantage. Well, much more coverage throughout the day, breaking things down for DraftKings, FanDuel, other DFS sites, betting perspective. You can get it all right here on the Stokastic DFS channel, as well as our Odds Shopper DFS channel. Jeff, how are you tonight? Are you looking forward to a different style of game than maybe we've seen thus far this year?
I mean, I weirdly am looking forward to this game. It's not really that I care about these two teams at all. It's just, you know, what we do. We're fantasy prop involved. And I think there's some players that are really interesting in this game. Got some players with interesting usage so far that haven't really popped off that I think have a chance. The Mitch Trubisky show is always entertaining one way or the other. So that's good as well. I don't know. I'm interested to see how Cleveland reacts after getting, absolutely just their pants pulled down the last 2 minutes there by the Jets.
My New York Jets, yeah.
Your New York Jets. Okay,
yeah.
Well, now they're your New York Jets. You didn't say anything about the Jets, Pete, the first week, and now they're your New York Jets. Okay.
Yeah. No, I flew up for that Jets opener. I live in North Carolina now. Flew up to New York. I got into the parking lot at 9:45 in the morning, was up at 5 o'clock, and still left in the third quarter because the Jets were so terrible in that first game. But yeah, I mean, look, pull out a little Joe Flacco miracle or whatever the heck that was. And Nick Chubb didn't take a knee. So now the Browns, they got some motivation perhaps on a short week to come back and show what they can do. Some of the basics of this game. Look, the Browns are a 4-point favorite. This is the lowest over-under of the week right now, 38.5. One of the reasons for that is the weather's not going to be great for this game. And it's not going to rain, but you're looking at a lot of wind, 20 to 30 miles per hour. It's enough to start to affect things. It's not exactly Mac Jones going back to throw 2 times like last year up at Buffalo, but enough that it can affect this game. So, Jeff, just, big picture, what are you walking in expecting out of this game? Are you playing for, Contrarian and Trubisky and Jacoby Brissett are going up the field? Or do you get the feel that this is going to be grinded out, ugly weather, running game? Yeah, it's what these teams want to do.
It's probably going to be the latter. I mean, whatever you said first, which was just an ugly game. I mean, there is like some. If we play the matchups here and we look at the matchups on Pittsburgh and we don't worry too much about the weather, and I mean by Pittsburgh, I mean their defense. Like, I do think that Brissett had a pretty good game last week against the Jets, and he's looked okay. And like he's got Cooper, he's got Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's seen like a pretty good target share thus far. It's kind of where you want to attack Pittsburgh. They have not been good on the outside against the wide receiver position. And then you've got Nick Chubb, obviously. I mean, Pittsburgh kind of knows what's coming there. They've been pretty good against the run still. Good defensive front. Still just not really a place you want to attack Pittsburgh long-term, in my opinion. So setting up interesting from that perspective. But then on the other side of the game, like the Pittsburgh offense has been, I think they haven't been talked enough about how bad it's been. Like Deontay Johnson is out there making plays. He's kind of just been like the savior. He's the only thing that's keeping this team competent, though. Najee Harris hasn't been able to do anything. Trubisky, even when he's been given time, has been just terrible at connecting with players downfield. They can't get George Pickens involved. Now you've got potentially bad weather as well. But I have some interest there. Like, I mean, I do. Again, like Cleveland allowed a massive amount of yards last week. I don't know if that was just a breakdown late in the game or if we should be looking at that long-term. But, Freiermuth, I think has a very good matchup as well. Cleveland tends to play a lot of zone. Freiermuth has been going off against zone. So I don't know. There's back and forth here, but I think at the very end, it's a game with a 38.5 point total. Bad weather. You're probably not going to see a ton of overs here.
No, you're not expecting anybody to be going up and down the field. Certainly might affect some of those deep plays. Like this isn't necessarily the game you expect Pickens to break out if it's going to be hard to throw a deep ball and connect on that. But Pickens isn't one of our options on the No House Advantage board. I just looking at what the contests are at No House Advantage tonight. You got a $20 entry, $10K to first place, 1,200 total can enter that. So be sure to check that out. You also have a $5 entry that gets $1,000 to first place. Last Thursday night, if memory serves me correct, it was a solo winner in the $20 contest. So that's a nice 10K to pull down. I believe it was 5 unders, 2 overs there. And you figure the unders probably be a little more popular this time around with the nature of this game. We got some really low numbers on the board. So let's start breaking down. We'll go position by position. We'll start with the quarterbacks. Begin, as you were talking a little bit there about Mitch Trubisky. 3 props on the board for him. You can look at the passing yardage at 221.5 yards. You can look at the passing touchdowns at 1.5. That's the one that I'm eyeing. And then half of an interception as well. What jumps out to you, Geoff?
Yeah, I mean, they all kind of jump out for the same reason, obviously. Well, one of them, no, I mean, all the same reason. They're all pretty strong underplays. I mean, Mitch Trubisky passing touchdowns, you mentioned it, 1.5. It's definitely, I mean, projecting is like, a top 10 play for us. We've got him projected for just barely over 1, which, is interesting because, I mean, the line's obviously at 1.5, like it's not at 1 or even like 0.5 here. Trubisky to throw 2 passing touchdowns. I mean, you'd need a pretty good game script here where, the Steelers are down late and, Mitch is maybe out there just, running and gunning in the last couple quarters, but with bad weather and just with the Browns, probably trying to really just, do their best to salt this game away. I mean, that's a strong play. And I really think his under passing yards is a strong play too.
Yeah. What
have we seen from Mitch Trubisky so far? He just cannot connect with the wide receivers downfield. I just don't know what's going to change. I think people want it to change because they want George Pickens to be involved so much, but like, I just don't see anything that's going to be a big factor here. All of a sudden he's going to start throwing it to George Pickens and that's going to connect. It's a strong underplay as well. We have projected to go under 221. And look, I mean, obviously no house advantage, guys. We do have free projections on the site. Check them out. These are, I'm just going off the projections here. But I do lean that way. But, no house advantage, obviously, we're talking about their pick'em contest. There's big GPPs. You're going against other people. You're creating, lineups. There's game theory involved.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone, Pete, is going to be leaning towards the under in this game. I mean, it's everyone's betting the under. There's a massive handle on the under. Everyone knows Trubisky sucks. Like there's legitimacy in creating lineups here with overs on like some of the Pittsburgh passing offense. I mean, so there's 2 different styles here that you're going to want to play. Obviously, if we're going with the projections, we're creating kind of that just core lineup that we want to be, heavy on, whether it's that or it's in the Against the House contest where you can create your own tickets. Sure, you lean under, but like having some exposure to like going over the Pittsburgh like passing game, I'm for that. It's just you don't want it to be like all of your exposure, obviously. So
yeah, I think it makes sense to mix it up a little bit and to play maybe one offense being behind, and you could play under on the running backs, over on the quarterbacks and the receivers. We're not looking at big numbers here in this passing game. If you're throwing the entire second half, it's relatively easy for particularly Jacoby Brissett to get to hit. I mean, 150.5 passing yards. That's one that our projections at Stokastic, and as Geoff mentioned, they're free on the site, stokastic.com. But 150.5 passing yards doesn't take much to get over that number. And you look at what Brissett has done thus far this season, 147 passing yards in the opener. So he's under it, but just barely. And then last week against the Jets, you mentioned he had a nice game, very high completion percentage, 229 yards. That was a pretty balanced game, even though the Browns were up a couple of touchdowns with 2 minutes to play. It was generally Browns ahead or they were tied. So there was more balance there. Nick Chubb did a big game at the 3 touchdowns, but Jacoby Brissett, very capable of getting 151 passing yards in this game, even if the Browns win, lose, no matter what the game script is.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I think, the popular play is going to be, okay, Brissett's total. I think most people know, even just looking at sports books, it's too low, even for Jacoby Brissett. So we're going to go over there. You'll probably look at pairing him with the receiver. Amari Cooper has a really low total at 38.5. We have him projected as a solid overplay too. So I think most people will be doing that. And how do you correlate that? Well, you can also take an under on Nick Chubb with 90.5 yards, which again, we like, and you can check out all these projections where we have them ranked. So that's certainly like one way to go about it. And I think that's the one thing, again, that I'll say again, it's going to be a popular play. These aren't necessarily ones where you have to like where I looked at this and I said, wow, like these are too low. I don't even really need to go into the Stokastic projections for these ones. Mm-hmm. It's when you get down the board where it becomes a little closer, where that's where you kind of want to look. Okay, are the projections neutral? Is there someone else I can pair? Like Donovan Peoples-Jones is a great one. I think at 31.5, I think his line on No House is actually bigger than the books, but we still like him for an over. And Donovan Peoples-Jones is a player who he's got an expanded route tree this season. He's seen over 5 targets in both games. He got lost in the sauce, so to speak, last week because he had Sauce Gardner on him, but I think he bounces back here, and I like that over as well. And if you are playing Brissett and you're going to go with some chalky plays, like maybe you put Donovan Peoples-Jones as like your captain, because I think people will play Brissett, they'll play Cooper, but they'll probably be, more inclined not to go too far down and be like, okay, well, we'll just play those two and I'll leave Peoples-Jones out because who knows what he's going to do. But I think he's actually a pretty good play. So that's one way to differentiate as well with your No House lineups is, don't just play like the Cleveland studs or their starters there, but you could go down. You could look at Njoku as well. We don't really have Njoku projected for as strong. And he's seen pretty good route participation and he's definitely out there, but the targeting hasn't been what we like. And I think just with the way I've seen the offense going, like I would stay on these 2 wideouts rather than go with Njoku. So Njoku is maybe like a good touchdown target, but I actually trust Peoples-Jones a lot more. We have Njoku, by the way, projected as like strong under,
big under,
on both regards, like the strongest plays perhaps on the board. So
yeah, a couple of things there. One on Peoples-Jones, he had 11 targets the first game, and then only 1 target last week against the Jets, as you mentioned, lost in the sauce. I mean, that's a huge difference right there. It tells you it might have had a lot to do with who was covering him in that game. And then for the Cleveland tight end situation, Jesse James was just placed on injured reserve. So you're not looking at a big snap count for Jesse. He did play 18 snaps the first couple of weeks. Maybe adds a little bit of opportunity for the Cleveland tight ends and David Njoku, but we have that as a very strong underplay. What's your favorite play with Jacoby Brissett to get back to the quarterback spot? Is it just the passing yardage, the touchdown? I mean, you're only looking at 1 passing touchdown for Brissett to get the over here. It doesn't take much to do that. You can do a shovel pass to Nick Chubb and get that done, right? The Aaron Rodgers special.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and again, like if you're using Brissett, you're going to, on overpassing yards, the over touchdown prop, I think most people are going to be going that way. And again, like you just want to think about how you're correlating it, obviously, but you could go over passing yards and then maybe leave out the passing touchdowns. Like there's plenty of areas where Brissett, just gets some good completions midfield. He goes over that easily. And then maybe he runs one in, maybe like Nick Chubb just takes them in. So again, like ways to differentiate, you can still go over Brissett and just be a little bit different, whether it's the receiver you're pairing him with, or just like maybe leaving out the touchdown prop. We have this projected as like a good play. I mean, we've also got what we also have for No House Advantage is some, what we just called the optimal lineup page for No House Advantage, and it's free to check out. Right. So, you can go there and you can see how some of these props are working out. Like, with Brissett, I mean, we haven't projected as like a strong play, like, in the kind of 10-7 range. So you can go over that on the yardage. And, like we have lineups where he's also projected like for other plays as well. So I would say that the passing yardage over is still my favorite play. If you want to get different, like you could like leave the Brissett passing yardage on the table and maybe just go over on the touchdowns as well. I mean, that's another thing that could happen. You could just throw 1 short touchdown and then, Nick Chubb runs the game out or something. So a lot of different ways to play Brissett. I think the main theme in here is his totals are too low and you're going to want to get exposure to him probably in your high counting slots on No House.
And you mentioned some of the free tools that we have over at Stokastic. We also have Stokastic Plus NFL tools for showdown and single game slates. You're not paying much for it. It's just $1. So you can click the link in the description of this video below or use the promo code PRIMETIME at checkout and get 1 week of our NFL Primetime package for just $1. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools for NFL DFS that we have to offer for showdown and single game slates, including player projections, ownership projections, top plays, lineup builder, and our expert Discord. This offer is only valid through September 29th. You got a week to get on it. Please note the Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included with this promo. But $1 and you get to see some of the magic that's behind the curtain there as far as these single game NFL projections are concerned. So we hit on the passing games a little bit with the quarterbacks, but let's really dive into what we're looking at for the pass catchers. And we'll start with the Steelers here. Deontay Johnson has been a big factor in the Pittsburgh offense thus far, targeted 22 times in the first 2 games. We're not looking at crazy numbers on him. 5.5 receptions, 62.5 yards. Chase Claypool has not been as active. 12 targets, lower numbers here, 4.5 catches, 49.5 receiving yards is what we're looking at. And then I'll throw in the tight end, Pat Freiermuth as well. Relatively high number, 4.5 receptions, 44.5 receiving yards, and a big 31-yard play against the Bengals, a career high play there that bumped up his yardage a week ago. So what jumps out to you as far as, who Trubisky's been targeting and how it fits into this Cleveland defense?
Yeah, I mean, Deontay Johnson is interesting. We do have him projected as an under, but it's what you'd call like a very neutral play. I mean, even on his yardage, like 62.5. I haven't checked the books today, but I believe like that number is actually a little bit higher than what most books have him at. So like we haven't projected for right around that number, and the same with receptions. I mean, we're almost talking about being right on the number. So Johnson, again, like we have him in our lineups. He's projected as like a very low point play. Like if you want to throw an under in on Deontay Johnson, I'm fine with that because there's lots of scenarios where that works out. But like that is also a player where I'd be fine if you're, just with the way he's played, he's seen pretty elite usage as well. And like I said, he seems to be the only receiver just because he's so good at getting open that I think you're going to be able to rely on long-term as long as Mitch Trubisky is at quarterback. I'm sure there'll be spike weeks for the other guys, but Deontay Johnson in a game where, again, like the corners for Cleveland haven't been like shut down at all, especially last week. I'd either be fine like leaving him off or maybe even just throwing an over here. I don't think that he's going to be a super popular play. So I don't know if you need to take a huge stance on him, but that's just, right off the bat, that's a player where I'm not necessarily like looking to go out of my way to fade if I can. Like I said, we haven't projected as like in our optimal lineups with very low point totals. Want to use them at the back end of your lineup, most likely. And then, you mentioned Claypool, a pretty strong under here. And I do like that under on Claypool. Not only is it projecting strong on the site, but Claypool, it's looked okay to me. It's just like, how many receivers are we going to be? Can Mitch Trubisky realistically like support? I think him and Freiermuth is like a legitimate connection. I mentioned the matchup for Freiermuth. I think it's far better this week than it was last week, even, which is good. I think he's going to see more zone coverage. So, you're asking me who would I rather fade? It's definitely Claypool. We actually have them projected fairly similarly, but Claypool is a guy who we also have in the optimal lineups around kind of the 8 to 5 point range, which is a strong play. Freiermuth not quite as he's up there too. Like I said, their projections are fairly similar in terms of what we like, but Claypool definitely a little bit stronger. We have him in some 8-point lineups as well, in the 8-point spot, for some lineups. So I like the under on Claypool. I'm less prone to like it on Freiermuth, even though I recognize like the 44.5 receiving total. That's bigger. That's a lot bigger than we're seeing around the industry as well. So both players kind of setting up as fades just in terms of what we're seeing. And Claypool to me is the guy who I would be much more like confident about doing that with.
There's a lot of fading in this game with even these low numbers. We're not expecting a whole lot tonight. This wind could be a factor. Maybe that does help out Freiermuth a little bit, right? He's generally going to be over the middle, possession receiver. You have a little bit of a connection there. But yes, we're generally looking at the unders. Cleveland, though, is interesting. You have Jacoby Brissett's passing yardage so far down. Amari Cooper's at 38.5 receiving yards. Donovan Peoples-Jones, 31.5 receiving yards. David Njoku is about on the level at 37.5. We have that as a very strong underplay. But you mentioned a little bit, Peoples-Jones makes you different. How do you like Amari Cooper in this game? He's very busy last week against the Jets. Certainly not as much week one.
Yeah, Cooper, again, is like one of the few plays. It's really funny the way this sets up. The totals on Cleveland players that on Cooper, it's really just Cooper and Brissett are, they're lower than industry standard, whereas pretty much everyone else seems like to be their props are set at higher than industry standard. So what we're getting from the site is essentially begging you to take the overs on Cooper and Brissett. And I'm okay with doing that, obviously, but you're going to want to differentiate a little bit. The Cooper over is something where, like it's projected as like a mid-range play, we'll say, or a low play. It's not like, especially on the reception total I'm talking about, but the yardage total is where I would definitely be going over. I mean, Cooper's yardage has been good. He still looks good after the catch. There's nothing there. I mentioned like the Pittsburgh secondary. I think it's a good spot for him. So really nothing bad to say about it. 38.5, lower than what we're getting around the industry. It's an over for me for sure. It's just like, again, if you're throwing in some money into the big contest, the big Thursday night contest on No House Advantage, I really would recommend. I think this game is going to be so polar in people's minds where, okay, we see these low totals. Let's take the over on these short ones. Let's go under on the Pittsburgh offense. I think everybody is creating lineups like that. So if you either leave out Cooper or you maybe even take an under on Cooper and go over on Donovan Peoples-Jones, like there's just so many different ways you can be just a little bit different. And I think with so many variables in this game, the weather, Trubisky, the variety of like options on Pittsburgh who could kind of like go for just like one long play, I'm really just prone to making weird lineups for this game. Like I as much as I like Cooper, like if you're like, I'm going to go under on him and Brissett's passing totals and then go over on like the Pittsburgh side, like I'd be fine. Like that's probably no one else is going to do that. So it's just an interesting game for props. We have a lot of like strong plays, but they're strong plays for a reason. And I think they're what you call obvious strong plays.
Yes.
I think it's the close guys where you can take some real stances as well, like on Deontay Johnson, maybe even on like Trubisky to an extent as well. But yeah, I mean, look, as much as we love talking about strategy in theory, this one's probably going to work out exactly how it seems. It's going to be an ugly game. I could see like almost
you're just tied for first place, with 40 other people.
Hitting, though. And maybe that's the other thing. Like you don't take any overs. Like, I mean, I'm talking like under on Chubb, under on everybody, because what we've seen in these games so far, and we've had a couple ugly games, which we usually don't get early in the season, but like the Bears Packers, I mean, look at the Bears offense in that game, 11 pass attempts, and then the monsoon game as well. I mean, I think these offenses are kind of on the level of the Bears, well, especially Pittsburgh. So yeah, I would almost just think about that. I mean, taking unders across the board as well as a play, and just because this one could just be, if the weather gets involved here, my God, like we could just be absolutely asleep by halftime.
Well, let's get a couple minutes in for the running backs, which are going to be a big key.
Yeah.
But first, I mean, we're talking and breaking this game down as far as No House Advantage goes. You could play in the Pick'em contest versus other people. You get a shot, $1,000 tonight. I mean, NHA is bringing the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. It's down. You can download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, and climb the leaderboard when you make correct picks. You can also test your skills versus the house. You get up to 20 times your entry if you hit all of your picks. You can play a variety of sports at No House Advantage. So be sure to check it all out. Daily fantasy sports has been redefined with No House Advantage. So as far as the running backs go, Najee Harris, 62.5 rushing yards. You can also play the receiving props here, 23.5 receiving yards, 3.5 catches. The snap count has been a little bit down for Harris. They said they want to knock it down, but he also had a foot injury week 1. He has bounced back from that, played plenty last week against New England, even when they were behind. And to me, the receiving props, if you're playing for Pittsburgh to win, he's not going to see a whole lot of passing opportunities. If you're playing the opposite way, they'll be there. He didn't see a target until the second half against New England last week when they were down, ended up seeing 6 targets, I believe it was, in that game. So he can get busy if they are behind.
He can. And I think, again, like you have to be careful with it, though. I mean, for Harris to be in that situation again, we'll almost need like Cleveland to be far ahead. And I think with the weather the way it is, I'm just not sure if these teams are going to be prone to like breaking out towards the pass. I actually like this one a lot on Najee Harris, just under the receiving total, 23.5. I just don't think there's going to be a lot of room out there for him. So, we haven't projected as like 6 yards under his total. I like that. I think that the reception prop is one where I would be a little less. It's still projected as a strong under at 3.5. But like you said, if we get to the point in the game where it's just like, Pittsburgh has been so bad at passing. Trubisky is like 6 for 18 or something. We could just see like a drive where Harris just gets like 5 targets in a row.
Yeah.
And maybe
Myles Garrett is stuffing Trubisky into the ground. He's just dumping it off to the running back.
Exactly. Where the Steelers just throw it a yard, like just get something done here. So the Harris reception prop, a little bit less confident, but I like the under on Harris receiving yards. I mean, I like the under on Harris. Harris is a guy I'm just fading all year. Like I faded him in his season-long rushing prop. That's well on its way to hitting. He's got a 62.5 rushing line here, which we like for the under. Although admittedly, it's not like a strong underplay, but I'll play it. I mean, I still think Najee Harris's props are kind of just being overrated off his season last year, where he just got so much volume and it kind of just finally, he broke through for some big games at the end, but like he was really just averaging under 4 yards per carry most of the season, sometimes under like 3.5 yards per carry, and just getting there through sheer volume from Ben Roethlisberger. So I think you keep fading Najee in this matchup. You can pick your poison. Our strongest one is under on the receiving yards. And, but really like he's just an underplay across the board for me again.
In the Cleveland running game, I think this is the hardest thing to try to figure out because you have some big numbers here. We're expecting a grinded out kind of game. There should be opportunities, but you also have 2 running backs to factor in Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt's line is 45.5. We project him right around there. And then Nick Chubb, 90.5 rushing yards. That's a big number to reach. The projections look at it 2/3 of the time. Chubb will be under that number, but there are certainly plenty of game scripts to keep in mind where Chubb does get there. Had plenty of opportunities last week against the Jets, even though he was under and ran for over 140 in week 1.
Yeah. And again, like this is another spot that I like attacking. It's a good place to end off on too, because I think that you can correlate these plays however you want, really. I mean, Chubb for us is projected as an under. It's not the strongest under, but it's definitely like 90.5 is bigger than his industry standard. So leaning under there is fine. And again, like you could, if you're going to make some kind of crazy lineup though, with like Brissett going under and Cooper going under, I would just play Chubb over with those 2 guys as well. So you can use Chubb kind of as your add-on. Like, am I going over on the Cleveland passing game? Probably going to go under on Chubb rushing. At the same time. If I'm going to get crazy and fade these low passing totals, let's go over on Chubb because someone's getting the yards for Cleveland and it's probably going to be him, right? They're just handing it off, getting 150 yards, whatever. And then you can mix in Kareem Hunt with it. I mean, I think there's scenarios where both Cleveland running backs go over as well. We have Hunt projected as a very slight overplay, which I really don't hate. I mean, I think you will see a good chunk of Kareem Hunt in this game. I wish we had a receiving prop for him as well, or a rush receiving yards. We don't. But even at 45.5, like that's kind of that's a little bit low for him. I think you're going to see a good chunk of him. He's obviously a really good rusher, and I mean, yeah. So the running backs you can take pretty hard stances on. I think that what most people will do, or one thing that you should consider doing is that if you're going under on Chubb, probably go over on Hunt. I still think in so many scenarios where you're just going to still see a big rushing volume from the Cleveland offense, which means that, maybe Chubb doesn't get there on that big total, but like Hunt still gets involved with a good number of carries. So that's how we have it set out. Like I said, like we've always mentioned, you can check these out on the site as well, but Hunt projected as a very like lean overplay. And then Chubb is actually a pretty strong under. Again, just these totals on the Cleveland offense kind of just begging us to go one way against the other. So it definitely feels like a trap, but
it feels like a trap. I mean, look, one thought for people to keep in mind as they're putting together their lineups tonight on No House Advantage, because it looks a little too easy, as you say.
Yeah.
And it's you got to find some way to differentiate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I said. Like, I think this is just a night where if I was entering the GPPs on No House Advantage, like I would be making some pretty crazy lineups. Like I said, like, going under on Brissett's passing total with an over on Chubb, and then maybe throwing in like some overs on the Pittsburgh passing side too. Cause nobody's going to have those lineups. Yeah. And if that hits, you're going to have very few, like there's going to be a lot of just tons of lineups with just busts, with just like 4 or 5 X's across the board. So because everyone's going to be going the same way. At the same time, you can play the strong props. Like you can play a Brissett over, you can play, like the Mitch under passing touchdowns, just mix in other plays with them. Or maybe you play, something that's going to be a little bit different at the top of your lineup, right? So you don't have to fade every single strong prop that we've talked about, but it's definitely a interesting game from the perspective. You can make some crazy correlations. You can go about it in so many different ways. I kind of like this one in a way, but it does also lean itself. This is going to be like a very high variance, I think, kind of contest. So fun, but also going to be hard to figure.
Well, it's a game theory to get involved in this Thursday night between the Browns and the Steelers. Hey, give us a like, subscribe, keep up with all of our shows, our DFS offers, our giveaways, and hit that notification bell as well. That'll give you alerts when our shows go live. We have a lot more coming your way here on the Stokastic DFS channel. MLB Live Before Lock starts up at 5:30 Eastern, 2.5 hours from now. And then we're breaking down the NFL from a showdown perspective with the deeper dive at 6:30 Eastern time. So 3.5 hours. We get it ramped up a little Thursday night as we kick off week 3 here. Jeff, pleasure. I'm Petey Mac. You guys take care.
See you guys.